It's a very special pleasure to be with you today. I'd like to use my time this morning to talk about the University of Alabama. When I was approached by the trustees of the Alabama system in late fall of 2002 about leaving and coming to Alabama, I thought long and hard. I was 35 years into my career with the University of Texas system, in all candor thinking more about retirement than a career move. But the trustees laid out their goals for the future of the University of Alabama. Alabama, for the better part of 2 decades, had been stalled in terms of enrollment somewhere between 19 and 20,000 students. The trustees very much wanted Alabama to be as respected academically in the country as it was athletically. And they wanted to see the University of Alabama become a truly national university. At that point in time, 75% of its students came from the state of Alabama. I was intrigued by that challenge, thought it would be an ideal way to complete a career. So on March 1st, 2003, I became president of Alabama. Just prior to taking office, I asked our staff to do a survey of really good students who had been admitted for the previous fall, who didn't come. I said, find out where they are, talk to them, talk to their parents. Why aren't they at Alabama? The reasons the students gave were varied, but the reason the parents gave was remarkably uniform. Alabama is a good school, but my son or daughter has an outstanding high school record and great test scores. I want him or her in class with other students as able and motivated as my child is. In the fall of 2004, we opened Honors College, which allowed us to say to those parents, you can send your son or daughter to Alabama. They will do all of their core work the first 2 years in class with only other Honors College students, and then migrate to the honors program of their major. For the fall of 2002, we had 7,600 applications and enrolled about 2,400 freshmen. Sorry, I've got that wrong. 7,400 applications, 2,600 freshmen. For the fall of 2000, 3 out of 4 were from the state of Alabama. For last fall, we had 33,000 applications, enrolled 6,800 freshmen. 64% of them were from outside the state, and 1 out of every 4 came to us with a perfect high school record. Of the 6,800 freshmen, 2,200 were in Honors College, and as a group, that set of 2,200 young men and women averaged close to a perfect record in high school and ranked in the top 6% of the country nationally in terms of test scores. Alabama has reached a point where I believe it is respected academically as it is athletically, and given the performance of some of our teams, that is an accomplishment. How did we get there? When we started in 2003, Alabama had no recruiters who worked outside the state. We now have 38 recruiters who work full-time outside the state, including 3 in the New York, New Jersey, Connecticut area. We restructured how the university operated. I had Vice President of Student Affairs, Vice President of Research, and all of the deans report to the Chief Academic Officer, the Provost, to free me up to spend the majority of my time for that first 5 or 6 years on the road, in high schools, speaking at recruiting receptions. When we did our first recruiting reception in Connecticut, we did it at the home of an alum in Fairfield and had 8 or 10 seniors plus parents. 4 of that group of seniors, and I can still see them, khaki pants, blue blazers, were from Fairfield Prep. And 2 of them ended up coming, our first students from Prep. Now when we have a recruiting reception, we do it at the Greenwich Country Club. We have between 250 and 300 high school seniors and parents. For this coming fall, we're just under 36,000 applications for the freshman class. We will enroll over 7,000 freshmen. And we will be somewhere between 1 out of 3.5 and 1 out of 4 of those freshmen will come to us with a perfect record in high school. To accommodate those students, we've had a very aggressive building program. Dylan has seen the campus. He's actually seen most of the buildings, but the numbers are still striking. For 9.5 years, the University of Alabama opened a new building every 90 days. The university was able to fund that growth because if you look at the numbers, in the fall of '02, when 76% of the students were from Alabama and 24% were from outside the state, those non-resident students in 2002 paid $9,600 a year. This past fall, when 64% of them were from outside the state, they were paying $26,000 a year, and they're going to pay $27,000 a year this coming fall. In order to ensure that as much of that incremental revenue as possible flowed to the bottom line, we centralized control of all facilities on campus in the provost's office. Up until then, buildings were controlled by deans, and if you talked to the deans, you would walk away convinced that they personally paid for that building and it would be used the way they wanted. Which means that very frequently, a dean would have a section of psychology with 80 students, but he wouldn't have an 80-seat classroom. But he did have 2 40-seat classrooms. So he would hire an additional adjunct professor and divide the class. We were able to absorb close to 3,500 students of our initial growth without having to add any faculty except in the area of English composition where the classes, because of the writing, are small. We were able to set up systems that allowed the chief academic officer to monitor the workload of every faculty member at the university. The very fact that the provost could know whether or not a person was carrying an appropriate load, even without having to do anything, caused department chairs to begin to assign more reasonable workloads, deans to be able to hold department chairs accountable, and the chief academic officer able to hold the deans accountable. Today, if you look at the operating margin of the University of Alabama, even though you don't normally use the word profit in association with an institution of higher education, Alabama has some of the strongest operating margins in the country. We have 11 new residence halls, 2-bedroom and 4-bedroom suites. But in some ways, what's most important about those residence halls is there is a faculty member, usually a faculty family, living in every one of those residence halls. Part of the reason we've been able to grow the way we have is we've worked as hard at recruiting the parents as we do recruiting the students. Growing up today is a lot more difficult than when we grew up. The opportunities for a fine young person from a good family to make bad choices are more significant today than they've ever been. So what we're trying to do at Alabama is create an environment that will give your child the best possible chance of growing into the type of young adult that you want him or her to be. We contact every incoming freshman early in the summer. We also contact their parents. We tell them responding is voluntary, but if you will share with us what your religious affiliation is, then you will be contacted by a member of our campus ministry group, and you'll be invited to have a new church or synagogue or temple home while you're with us at Alabama. When we did that starting 9 years ago, 10 years ago now, there was some criticism. Why are you using state resources to promote religion? And our response was, we're using state resources to try to create an environment where a student stands the best possible chance of staying connected to the values that he or she grew up with in their parents' home, and bring those values with them to the university. Because keeping those connections, keeping them grounded in those values is critically important, because when that young man or woman essentially leaves home, majority of them for the first time, they're leaving behind all of the structure. They're on their own. So the more we can do to keep them connected to the values they grow up with, the greater the likelihood they'll make good choices. When we put that program in, there was a steady decrease in the number of discipline problems, a steady decrease in the number of young men and women wrestling with alcohol or drug issues. Area churches in Tuscaloosa are wrestling with a good problem. They don't know where to put them. St. Francis, the Catholic Church on campus, approached us a little over 6 years ago. For 3 additional acres, they had to build a new church. The old one's the student center. Calvary Baptist on the edge of campus has a Wednesday evening service for Alabama students. They seat 850. We have students standing in the aisles. Almost every church in Tuscaloosa has experienced dramatic growth in the number of students attending. It has strengthened the environment. The presence of that faculty family in the residence halls has made a big difference. The first week in October, our Dean of Students has a list of every freshman who hasn't become a member of any group. And we reach out to them and ensure they become a full member of the community. We have a program that watches the freshman grades from the first round of exams, usually in October. So if you've gone through high school as a B+ student, and those first round of quizzes come out, and you're getting C- and Ds, something's wrong. And we're going to reach out to you quickly before you end up dragging a bad semester around behind you. Young people are young people, and sometimes they make questionable decisions. We have a program called 348 Ride. The university has a fleet of minivans that operate from 7 at night till 7 in the morning. If you've been out and had a beer too many, we tell you to put your keys in your pocket, call 348 Ride, and we'll get you home, no questions asked. If a young lady's out on a date and her date's had one too many, don't get in that car, call us, we'll come get you, no questions asked, we'll get you home. I anticipate that Alabama will continue to grow. It will continue to be stronger and stronger academically. Athletics plays a very significant role in the progress we've made. A strong intercollegiate athletics program is a window into the university. You receive publicity through the majority of the year, particularly football and basketball season, that you couldn't possibly afford to buy. I was talking earlier about the fact when we hired Coach Saban as our football coach several years ago and paid him $4 million a year, the highest salary of any coach at the time, I have a file full of emails and letters questioning my judgment, my sanity, and several other aspects of my being. I have another file from many of those same people who feel the $7 million we are paying him annually is not enough. As part of our building program, we enlarged our football stadium to 102,000. It is sold out. As I was saying earlier, for a home football game, we will have 700 plus RVs roll into town. Managing that intercollegiate athletics program is a very important part of a president's job, because compliance issues are increasingly complex, coaching is increasingly competitive, and the pressure on a coach to make a questionable decision to get a little bit of an advantage is significant. When you have a winning coach, that coach is watched closely. We've had situations where people with cameras have followed Coach Saban around the country as he visits high schools recruiting, trying to see if they can catch him doing something inappropriate. He is one of the most honorable people I've ever met. all of our coaches fall into that category, but again, you stay very close to it. There's a tradition at Alabama that the president and the athletic director go down to the field at every game, home and away, and you go to all of them, home and away. And you're the first two people in the locker room, and you shake the hands of the team as they come in. I was in my second year. I was standing dutifully at the door, shaking hands, and one of our offensive linemen was coming in. It was early in the season. It was very hot. The young man was drenched in perspiration. I held out my hand. He looked at me and he said, "No, man, let me give you some love." And he wrapped his arms around me and picked me up off the ground. There is no dignity when your feet are going like this. You're about that far off the ground. Also, that sport coat, tie, and shirt immediately went to the dry cleaner as quickly as I could. You're also involved in helping coaches in all sports recruit, because very frequently when the recruits are there, particularly with their parents, the parents want to know how much emphasis is going to be placed on the education of my child as opposed to what their value is to you on the field or the court. And so I talk with large numbers of parents of prospective athletes. There are several weekends in the fall, particularly for football, when they narrow it down to their primary recruits, and those recruits come in groups of 6 or 8 with their immediate family. And every Saturday morning I go over with the AD and meet the recruits and their families and spend some time talking with them. And several years ago, we had a young man there who was going to start playing for us the following fall named DJ Fluker. DJ is playing with a professional team on the West Coast now. DJ is a large young man. I do not know what parents are feeding these young men, but whatever it is, it's amazing. DJ is about 6'6", weighed about 360, 365. Shaq O'Neal, the basketball player, has a size 21 shoe. DJ has a 22. When they brought me over to DJ's table, he was sitting there, and the assistant coach said, "DJ, we'd like you to meet our president." I looked at DJ. He had a plate in front of him. He had taken what appeared to be 6 or 7 biscuits and cut them in half and had them arranged in concentric circles. There was a sausage patty on top of every biscuit, and the whole thing was covered with sausage gravy. Yeah. And DJ was sitting there with a knife and a fork. And when the assistant coach said, "We'd like you to meet our president," there was no movement for a moment, and then his head started to turn. And the thought that crossed my mind was, I've interrupted him at feeding time, I'm dead. I've had the privilege of being in Alabama during one of the most exciting times in its history. The university has never been stronger academically. I think within the near future we'll be breaking the 40,000 mark in terms of enrollment. But we will remain focused on creating the kind of educational experience that focuses on these young men and women as individuals, and that remains focused on creating an environment that gives them a chance to grow up into fine young adults, and creating an environment that recognizes the importance of values as well as mastering academic subject matter.